And as I said last week, I think especially the opportunity with the new senior minister here, with looking at what's going to happen with a new musical director, what is this church going to be? But what I brought for you to bring home, kind of a printout about the 4 spiritual types, and then ways that we can nourish or build areas where we'd like to be more understanding, more responsive, with some practical ideas. And so my goal today was to sit back, to talk about what the goals of this is. Again, a mere intellectual exercise doesn't really get you very far. It can be fun, it can inspire you, but our goals are, 1, to acknowledge and strengthen our present gifts. All right, one of the presumptions was that we have, no matter what you call it, a spiritual life. 2nd, to look at the opposite quadrant. All right, so this was a quadrant for spiritual types, and most likely the one that you were really resonating with was possibly the opposite, or you had fewer. But this was a surprise for me, so we'll talk more about that. But to grow in areas that don't resonate with us. And thirdly, to appreciate with more intention is a key phrase. Quadrants on either side of our dominant type. So you have your dominant type, again, with the Enneagram, if you've been through that would, I think, have some resonance. But let's just say that those are areas that you respond to, maybe a little less than your dominant type. And then ultimately, the question that I want to end with, after we discuss for a while here, is how knowing ourselves and how having maybe this many different opinions of how we see the church, do we go about working together as a community? One of the hardest things of church life is community. We come together for a reason. How is it that we benefit? Don't forsake the gathering, the Bible tells us. Why? Because there's something to be had from that advances us. So, that's the speech. Here's the question. What surprises? What surprises did you find going through this? What assumptions did you, let me back up. What assumptions did you make? We talked about 4 different real broad types, all right? So those who kind of operate out of a head spirituality. They love to talk theology. They love to they love to talk church. 2 different things, right? Because theology is the ology of Theo, and church, we get into doctrine and we get into tradition, and those folks love that, and we need them for what they help us recall and structure. Some of us might find them dogmatic and dry. There's a hard spirituality, and this is the personal service, kind of the, you know what, I want to do something for this church. I want to nurture this particular church community. And I'm doing this because somebody's got to do it. It's got to be done. Otherwise people are going to complain if there's no cookies afterwards. Or if we don't have community events, if we don't have get-togethers. Some of the strongest, to me, arguably some of the strongest moments in this church have been the men's breakfast, the women's breakfast, the retreats, the all-church retreat, the community times when we just stop for a moment and be people. And then the third one was the affective or apophatic, which it just means negative theology. We can only know what we don't know about God. And those people, they provide these reflective questions that are a little less type A about, the way communion in the pews means, we're serving each other, or communion by the pastors means that we're, it's authority of the church coming down on the people. The negative that's been attributed to them is that they're seen as navel gazers, passive, withdrawn. I took personal exception to this one, so I walked away as hurt as any of you yesterday or Sunday, because especially in meditative cultures where they believe that there is actual effect created by meditation. Apophatic is the kingdom spirituality. So these are the people who are out there, they're protesting, they're calling for reform, they got a petition for everything, they're the people who have resolutions, and it's always something. Now, what they do is they move society forward. Their shadow side is they can be seen as moralistic and prone to tunnel vision. And the phrase that she used, if you aren't for us, you're against us. Jesus said, go, and you're not going. You're focusing on the church, you're focusing on your belly button, you're focusing on worship. Go. And so it's good to be mindful of all these things. I just thought she was a little bit harsh. So going into this, what were your expectations? What did you think you would find your dominant spiritual type? That's our work ahead of us. We have for many, many years worshipped a particular way. And so people who don't resonate with it. Trying to create a worship service that taps into all four of those is going to be difficult. And that's why you see churches saying, well, we have our modern worship, at 9, and then our, traditional worship at 10, and Saturday night we got this kind of worship. And we could do that. And we could have a contemplative service. And that's one thing, like today, we've got great models out there. But it's the feasibility of it. My first year people would say, we need this group, that group, this group, this group. And I would say, yes ma'am, yes sir, yes ma'am, yes sir, until I got fried. And then ultimately, my boss at the time said, here's what you say. You go, great, let's start that. You and I. And then you would see the strength of that. If you come up with an idea, and here's what you need from the church, run with it. It may not take off, and that's okay. That doesn't make people bad. Doesn't make you wrong. It just, we got to look at the realities of our times, which is we get most people on Sundays. Well, and so, how we address this is going to be important. Is going to be, can we come at it from a standpoint of thank God for the people who aren't like me? You know what I mean? And can we listen rather than demand our own way as we go forward? Because the music part is a huge part. The worship service is a huge part of it. And so can we work together as a congregation? I guess this is one of the reasons, that we're looking at this now, and we may expand this more and certainly be talking about it as we go forward. And so the point is, how can we nurture ourselves as individuals? How can we grow, all right? Because we can learn from each other. And then how can we, as we work together as a congregation, say, here are some needs I have, but also, bless the people who are bringing the viewpoints that we don't.
Well, that was the piece that I wanted to hear you say, so you said it, but I'll add to it. But I think that, I wish there were more people in here talking about this, because I think it's really crucial, not only that we understand ourselves and our own spiritual type, but that we accept and understand and appreciate the others.
There are families out there that can't get their kids into worship because it doesn't, honestly, the modern worship model, isn't the panacea for everything. And it's just, sometimes it's the fact that it's Sunday morning. And so they need, what can we do at home? What's the spiritual nurture that can be done at home? So that's a different quadrant altogether. So, I think that's a good question to keep in mind as we go forward looking at worship. Because I think with consumer Christianity, people will go to church, and oh my God, they have folk music or jazz or whatever, or the pastor had a robe, the pastor didn't have a robe, and all this stuff. That ultimately, is your point to go to a good show, or is it to know God?